Alright, good morning everyone and welcome to my little shop. I have laid out the tools here that we are going to use. Today we will be swapping the save battery in this Pokemon Blue cartridge. Of course, we're going to need some tweezers. Just about any job you're going to do when soldering is going to be a little bit easier, at least with some tweezers. The second thing we'll need is some flux. I prefer using flux from a syringe, it's just much easier to apply. And of course, we'll need our soldering iron. I'm using a pretty large tip today, just because the pads for these batteries are pretty large themselves, and we need to be able to heat them quickly so that we're not burning up the board. Before we can actually get to the PCB inside of there, we're going to need a game bit driver in order to remove the single screw from the back of the cartridge. And once that battery comes off, we're going to need to clean the pads up with some soldering wick or solder braid. This stuff just sucks the solder right off of the pads. We will also need an X-Acto knife or some other kind of cutting implement, which we will use to cut our Kapton tape. The Kapton tape will be used to protect the pins on the cartridge while we're soldering, just to make sure that they do not get splattered with any solder by accident. And we will be using some solder. Now I typically avoid leaded solder, but today I'm going to go ahead and use leaded. It melts at a lower temperature and it's generally just a little bit easier to work with. And since these pads are so large, every bit of help that we can get is going to help out, make it that much easier. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and set all of this stuff off to the side where we can access it quickly when we need it. We'll go ahead and get this game out of here and get this opened up. And it's actually off of the screen, but I am using a magnet to keep track of that screw. Those screws aren't exactly common. You're not going to find them in a lot of other devices or electronics. It's mostly just Nintendo stuff, so you want to keep track of those if you can. Now that we've got it open, so we can see, let's see if I can get it to come into focus here. There we are. 9811, so that I believe was manufactured in November of 98, or maybe that's the date that it was installed to the board. Not totally sure, but we definitely want to replace that, as it's let's see, well, it's nearly as old as I am, just to be honest. And the PCB, of course, just kind of falls right out of there. There's nothing securing it into the cartridge other than the screw that holds it all together. Once we've got that out, we can go ahead and set this off to the side where it will be safe. And later on, we'll clean that up with some paper towels and some rubbing alcohol, just to make sure that it's as clean as possible and not getting dirt into consoles or anything. For now, we'll go ahead and move our PCB out of the way and move this case. I'm just going to bring this over here. What this is, I believe it's called like helping hands or something, but it's basically just a little metal platform, which I can mount a magnetic light to, as well as these little posts. And then I can use these posts to hold my PCB while I'm working. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and use our Kapton tape, and we're going to get these pins down here covered up so that we don't splatter any solder on those and end up ruining the PCB while we're changing out the battery. We're going to take this extra here and we're just going to fold that back over to the back. Now our pins are fully protected from any solder that might go flying whenever the battery is removed. I'll go ahead and just remove this from my little metal platform here. Set our knife off to the side as we don't actually need that now. I'm probably going a bit overboard with these posts to hold the PCB, but I don't like my work to move around. So now we're going to take our tweezers. We're just going to slide them very carefully under the battery. We're going to go ahead and turn on our soldering iron now and get that heated up. I do most of my soldering at about 340 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure offhand what that translates to in Fahrenheit, but it tends to work out pretty well, and as long as you don't put too much heat into things, as in hold your iron to them for too long, it shouldn't damage anything, but it should melt most solder pretty quickly and easily. Now that my soldering iron is warmed up, we're going to go ahead and tin the tip. You tin the tip typically by just applying some solder to it. You'll want to apply a good amount of solder to it rather quickly. And all that does is just coat your tip and protect it from oxidizing and needing to be replaced. So now that I've got my tip ready, we're going to go ahead and bring our iron in, and I'm going to hold these tweezers, but I'm actually going to let them kind of release and lift up on the battery once this solder is hot. So I'll go ahead and touch that to the tab. Now that the solder is hot, release the tweezers. Alright, as you can see, the tweezers kind of sprang up a little bit faster than I wanted them to, but it easily removed the tab from the pad there on the board. Now we can simply come over here, heat this other pad up, and slide the battery off there. Now I've gone ahead and cleaned the solder off of the tip of my iron here. The reason for that is because we are actually going to be cleaning the remaining solder off of these pads now. I'm going to go ahead and try to zoom in for you guys here so that you can see kind of what's going on a little bit better. Okay, so we've got a little bit better of a view, it looks like. Now I'm going to get my solder braid. What I'm actually using here is MG Chemicals Super Wick 426 lead-free. This works really well for unleaded solder. It will just suck it right off of the board, and typically what you're going to find from the factory is going to be unleaded solder. So we'll go ahead and get some flux. apply just a small amount of that to each of these pads. The flux is a thermal conductor, so what it's doing is it's actually helping to melt the solder faster, and it's also just protecting the board generally from being overheated while you're trying to work on it. So, oh, and also it's going to help the solder flow. When you have flux, the solder will flow kind of into position, almost like magic to me. Whereas if you don't have flux, well, you can get some pretty wild results, like mountains of solder with sharp little peaks on the top of them. Anyway, we will go ahead and get this pad cleaned up to begin with. I'm just going to get my braid into position. We'll work it around just a little bit to make sure we get all of it off of there. All right. As you can see, it's just wicked all of that solder straight off of the pad. So now I can trim that little bit off of my braid and get this other pad cleaned up as well. And of course, in between every time I use my soldering iron and the next, always clean my tip off. I'm actually using I believe it's a brass sponge to clean the tip. Okay, so we've got our wick trimmed up nicely there. And we're going to go ahead and get this other pad cleaned off. Now, we want to avoid, heating up anything else here that's around it, so I'm going to try to position myself where I'm not touching anything else with this solder braid, just because I don't want to risk transferring any heat. Now that I've got that lined up on top of the pad there, I'll go ahead and apply my iron. I'll kind of scooch it around just a little bit. There we go. See if I can get it to focus a little bit better here. There we go. As you can see, those pads are nice and clean. We will go ahead and take some alcohol to them, get all of that flux out of there really quick. Grab a Q-tip here. Alright, so I've got some Q-tips here. And some isopropyl alcohol. We're just going to clean all of this flux back up off the board. Make sure that our pads look nice. Hit them with the other side of this Q-tip really quick and just get any dirt and everything off the board. Alright. Yeah, it looks like a little bit of dirt came off of there as well. So we'll go ahead and just let that alcohol dry right up. Might help it out here a little bit. Alright. And now we are ready to install a new battery. I'm actually going to pause the video here because I've got to dig a package of batteries out of a drawer here, but we will be right back and installing that new battery. Okay, so I have obtained a fresh battery. Looks like the tabs on this are just a little bit long, so we're actually just going to trim those up just a little bit. For that, I will be using my handy dandy little flush cutters. trimmed that pretty well, so let's see if we can, there we go. Alright, so that side is trimmed. We'll go ahead and get this other side trimmed as well. I'm just going to line it up right there on the end of that circle. Alright, and that doesn't seem to have done the trick, so let's go ahead and try that one more time. There we go. What I'm going to do, because I did twist that just a little bit, is take some pliers. I'm just going to flatten that back out. Okay. There we are. So it looks like that is ready to go onto the board. Of course, you always want to pay attention to positive and negative. Positive and negative are generally clearly marked on these, but you can also tell because the smaller edge of these is generally going to be your negative, and then the bigger end is going to be your positive. This over here is actually like a cap on the cell battery, which is why it's smaller than the main body there. So we will go ahead without further ado and get this lined up with our pads here, and of course it's marked on the board, positive and negative. Alright. Of course, we are going to apply some more flux here just to help our solder flow really well. Get that all over that pad there, and we'll do the same over here. There we are. Alright, and before I solder, I'm going to go ahead and re-tin the tip of my iron, clean off any extra solder that might be on it, and then we can apply some solder directly to the tip of the iron. Once we've got a good amount there, we're just going to hold our battery in place right where we want it, and we're going to solder this first connection. Apologize for my shaky hand, as I don't typically record my work, and so it has me just a little bit nervous, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not used to people watching as I solder things. Alright, now that first one is soldered down, we don't have to worry about our battery moving around on us. We're going to get a good amount of solder on our iron again, try to get all these fumes to run through our extractor so we're not breathing them. And then we can go ahead and solder this second pad here. So I'm just going to position the battery, this other tab on the battery, exactly how I want it. And we're just going to quickly tap down, get that solder onto the tab in the pad. Now it looks like I actually kind of burned through my flux really quickly there, and I got a little mountain of solder here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some more flux to this. we're just going to make sure that this solder joint flows really well. You don't want it to be all, there we are. Yeah, we don't want to have a mountain peak on our solder joint. All right. Now I'm just going to take another Q-tip here with some rubbing alcohol again, or some isopropyl alcohol, whatever you prefer to call it. I'm going to go ahead and get all of this flux cleaned back up off the board as well as I can. Go ahead and switch to the other side of the Q-tip here. You don't want to be smearing flux just around the board. We want to go ahead and just wipe it off and then switch to a new Q-tip or a different side of the Q-tip. Of course, it helps if you roll your Q-tip while you're cleaning. That just keeps you from, you know, stretching fibers off of it and leaving them all over the board. Alright, it looks like I've done an okay job there on getting the flux out of there, so we'll go ahead and just go back over it with a dry Q-tip. Make sure we clean up any remaining alcohol or flux that may be sitting around on the board. Alright, and there you guys have it. That battery is a brand new one. And we'll go ahead and just test the voltage on it, which typically I would do before I install a battery, but because I was making a video today, I didn't want to get too in-depth with everything, because I really want everyone to kind of come away with more of the fundamentals more than anything else. Okay, you can't actually see it here. I'll go ahead and bring this onto the screen. And as you can see, we've... Oh, well, if I can get that wire out of the way. There we are. We've got a good 3 volts in there. So there you guys have it. That is all it takes to swap out the battery on a Pokemon cartridge to enable you to save your game again. And if you'd like, you can stick around. I'm just going to move this off to the side where it's safe for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and clean up this cartridge shell, as it looks pretty nasty. This is actually my personal copy of Pokemon Blue, and I guess I had purchased this one, I think, off of eBay whenever I was restarting my Pokemon collection. I guess I just never got around to opening it up and looking inside, because this thing is it's pretty gross, to be honest. So we'll go ahead and start out with some paper towels here. I'm going to zoom things out just a little bit. Alright. Paper towel. Get some rubbing alcohol on there. And we want to be careful not to get this onto the sticker on the front, as rubbing alcohol will quickly destroy the sticker. We're just going to take and get the bulk of the nastiness out of here. Once we've kind of gone over things once with paper towels, we can go back into it with some with some Q-tips and just get a better job done there. So that already just looks quite a bit better to me. I'll go ahead and wipe down this portion up here. Alright, and then we'll go ahead and get these edges. Okay. We'll go ahead and do the same thing on this one. Now, we want to be careful because this one has this little nub here, and that nub is there to hold the PCB in place. That and the screw going through it are the only things really there that do hold it in place. So we'll go ahead and clean this up nice and carefully, watching out for that nub as we go. Alright, now we can go ahead and move on, well, to a new part of our paper towel for one. Let's get a clean area here. There we go. Put a little bit more rubbing alcohol on there. We'll go ahead and get this cleaned up really quick. No sticker on this one, so we don't have to worry about getting that wet and turning it into a soggy mess. Which coincidentally is what happens with the paper towels after I've used them for a moment. Alright. So that's a good basic cleaning. Got most of the dirt and stuff out of there. I'm going to go ahead and go over it now with some Q-tips. And the Q-tips will help me get into all the little cracks and crevices and stuff and the corners that are all over this. Alright, so we will go ahead now, swap over to the other side of this Q-tip. We're going to try to get these little lines that are engraved in the side here. Alright. Now that that's done, we can go ahead and take a Q-tip to the front of the cartridge. And one thing I'd like to show everyone while I'm doing this is one of the ways that people use to verify that these cartridges are actually authentic Nintendo products and not reproductions or fakes. So right here we have an imprinted letter and number with a dash between them. And these imprints are generally, as far as I've seen, only on the authentic cartridges. You're not going to find those on the duplicates. I'm not sure, what the difference is in the manufacturing process, or if maybe it's just something that none of the reproduction makers have attempted to reproduce. Maybe they failed, maybe they've just never attempted, I don't know, but typically that's a good way to tell if at least the shell for the cartridge is legitimate. And of course, another way that you can actually tell if your cartridges are authentic is on the PCB itself. I'll get this cleaned up and then I'll get that PCB back into frame for you guys. Alright, now on the PCB, on the back, a Nintendo PCB will actually have these 4 rectangles here. You'll see all these gold deposits. It'll say Nintendo. It'll have the 4 rectangles. You'll also see these over here. That all lets you know that this is an actual Nintendo PCB. If it didn't have, say, these here, or the Nintendo, then you would know that your cartridge is not actually legitimate, but a reproduction, which of course doesn't really matter if all you intend to do with it is play, but if you want your game to have some kind of collector's value, typically you would want the authentic cartridge rather than a reproduction. Now we are going to just finish off by cleaning up these little engraved lines here on the front a little bit better, as well as this area here where it says Nintendo Game Boy and generally likes to accumulate a lot of dirt. Alright, so I'm pretty happy. Okay, now I'm pretty happy with the job I've done here cleaning it. I'm going to go ahead and take some canned air. Just blow any dust or fibers that may be remaining off of there. As well, it'll help any remaining isopropyl alcohol to dry up. Alright, now that we've got everything cleaned, our battery has been swapped, we are ready to go ahead and take this tape off of here. We'll go ahead and start out here on the back. We'll carefully peel it off across the front. Alright, and in the future I will likely try to clean up those pins a little bit. I've got a special fiberglass pin made for cleaning these, but right now we're just trying to get it to hold a save file. So let's make sure that we've been successful in the main goal of the video today. All right. So that's got our cartridge back together. We'll go ahead and just put our game bit screw back in place here. I like to make sure these are nice and tight. You don't want to strip anything, but you do want that to be secure so that your cartridge doesn't try to come apart on you later. And now we are ready for testing. If you have stuck around this long, thank you very much for sticking it out with me. I apologize for shaky hands and rambling. This is my first video, so as I said, I'm just a little bit nervous, and not used to recording myself as I go or talking to the camera. I'm sure you guys can hear this is the special motherboard from Funny playing that has an upgraded amplifier built into it, so it's nice and loud, which is wonderful if you're used to barely being able to hear your Game Boy. So, looks like we didn't damage anything. It is still booting, allowing us to start a new save file. We'll just run through all of this text. Okay, we've advanced to the point that we can save. So let's turn that out, or turn that off rather. Pull that out. We'll wait a few seconds. Plug it back in. And now for the moment of truth. Let's see if we have a save file. There it is. All right. So that will complete today's video. Once again, thank you so much if you have followed along all the way up until now. Hopefully I will be able to record many more of these in the future, and if you guys enjoyed watching this, please like the post, maybe share it, and don't forget to follow our page, as we will have some console giveaways coming up very soon. I don't know, I might give one away at 100 followers. I'm feeling generous, and to be honest, I do have a few Game Boys here, so thank you everyone, and I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend.